Okay, so it should be recording to the cloud now. Can everyone hear me clearly? Awesome. Okay, let's get started. I'm just gonna share my screen. So first, we're going to make sure that you download the 1 to 500 site plan that's provided on CourseLink. And I like to start making like a folder on my computer based on each assignment. That way you're organized when you're working and it's all in one spot. So I'm just gonna pull up Illustrator. Can everyone see?
Yep.
Yep, okay, awesome. So to start off, you wanna go to File. Right now I already have options open, but when you open up Illustrator without anything open, it should show this main screen that has some preset dimensions of artboards, and then also on the side here, you can kind of put in specific dimensions that you want. So for this assignment, we'll be working on 11 by 17. And make sure that the orientation is also landscape wise, just because the site plan that we'll be working with is also in that format as well. So I just like to give it a title. So assignment 1, Lark 220. Okay, and then also just make sure when you start working, go to more settings and click on, in terms of color mode, you want to put it as RBG. Since we won't be printing, this is just so that on monitors, it'll all show up the same color, even though we are working in black and white. But just for now, make sure it's on that mode. And then click Create Document. And then it'll bring this white piece of, I guess, paper or artboard that you can start pulling things into the file. So what you want to do, can everyone see the file I opened as well? Showing the different documents? No.
No, we can't see that one.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering, I'm just trying to see if I can split the screen here. How about now? Here.
Oh.
How about, can you see
Yes.
the, okay, awesome. So I've already downloaded the site plan. And what you want to essentially do is you can drag and drop this in to the file. On Mac, it should also work as well. And just kind of set it on your artboard. Another option, you want to make sure that the image is also embedded into the file. So that way, when you save and reopen the document, it'll still be there. So if you just go to the top here and click on the image, make sure you click embed, and then that way it stays there. I'm just gonna move this over. So this essentially will be on your base layer. So in the assignment brief, it kind of goes over the different layers that you have to include. And those are the ones that you should have, but then like Nadia mentioned before, you can also add more layers. So right now we're gonna call this base map.
Oh, Abby, I think it's frozen. You need to go back.
Oh,
here we
here,
go.
I'm just gonna reshare. Maybe.
Sure, yeah.
I'm just gonna turn off my camera as well, so that may make it a little bit.
That helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of, you have to, I think what you have to do is you have to, that's what happened to me when you're exiting screens to a new screen, you have to stop sharing and go back in. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Somebody asked if you could embed it again.
Okay, awesome. Can everyone see my Illustrator file right now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, awesome. So to embed the image, just once you've brought it in from your computer, make sure you click on it and click. So right now it says embedded, but there'll be an option that says embed up there. There's also a source on CourseLink that kind of goes into more detail this as well. So you could also use that as reference, but just for now, make sure you click embed. So then that way, when you reopen it, it'll always be in the file. And this will, like I said before, will be on your base map layer. So to add another layer, you want to go to this section, create new layer. And then this will add a separate layer as well. So when I work in Illustrator, I like to lock my base layer. That way any lines or anything you add to the document, it won't change or move this around so that it's accurate. So to do so, you just click this box here, and that will essentially lock it. So then you can't anytime you click, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but anytime you click on the image, it just won't move. But for now, okay, so in the different layers in the document, there's a text layer, which I like to put my scale and north arrow on. So we're going to add that just because once we start the drawing, we want to make sure we have our scale so that everything in the drawing can go accordingly. So text and north arrow. And when you're working on that layer, just make sure you select it as well. So if I zoom in here, the image is a little bit blurry, but this should be, can you see my cursor? It should be 10 meters. So this line on the scale bar should essentially be 2 centimeters. So if you go to File, another thing that's important is if you go to Document Setup, you want to make sure that your units are in centimeters, since that's what we'll be using for this one. So just, I'll do that again just so that it's clear. So you go to File and then Document Setup, and then units should show the different options, and then you just go to centimeters. And then here as well, you can also edit the artboard if you wanted to make the page bigger afterwards, but right now it's only 11 by 17. So then that way, any of the tools or features that you use will be working in centimeters so that it all aligns to our scale. Okay, so to start the drawing, you want to remake the scale bar so that it's accurate. So what I like to do is I just like to click on the line just so it's precise and click it once and then type in the length. So for the 1 to 500 scale, since 1 centimeter equals 5 meters, 2 centimeters essentially will equal 10 meters in this case. And then you also want to make sure that this is sitting on a 180-degree angle so it lays flat. And then you also want to add a stroke to this line. So the different strokes options are here. I'll go over this in more detail later on as well. But stroke is essentially the thickness of the line. So for example, 0.75 points is thicker than 0.25. And you can also type in directly the line weight you want as well. So for now, we'll do it as this to make it thicker so that it's more apparent. And then I just like to line this up exactly to make sure. So right now the drawing is to scale that we want. And then what I like to do as well, I can kind of show how to add a line. Okay, so the pen tool, which I'll also go over in more detail as well. On the side here, there's the pen tool, and then there's also the curvature tool. This is also listed in the document on CourseLink that has all the details as well. So the pen tool essentially creates straight lines, whereas the curvature creates more curved lines and has more anchor points. So for a straight line, when you want to make it not on an angle, I guess, you hold down Shift and make sure it's connected to the anchor on the existing line. And when you're done, just press Enter. So if I take away, oh, another thing as well, in the layers, you can hide or turn off the visibility of certain layers. So when you're working on a drawing and let's say you want to get rid of the base layer or the base map, you can turn it off so that you can see the rest of your drawing without the distraction of what you've been using to work on it with. So essentially this here is 10 meters, but on our map it'll be 2 centimeters. So to add in text to label the scale, you want to click on the text icon as well, or the type tool, and you can directly just click on the page and start typing. So I'll do 0 meters. To change the size of the font, let me just move this over. There'll be some options at the top. You can also change the font as well as the orientation. So I like to center it, so then that way it always lines up where I want it. And we can just make this smaller as well. So I'll do 6 points. And then you can just directly move it over. And then to create the scale, you can just copy and paste. I know on PCs it's Control C and Control V for paste, and then on Macs, that's an option as well. So just to edit it, you can click on it and then add in more font. So there's essentially our scale, so you can see. You can also add a center line to show the 5 meter mark, but for now I'll just keep it as this. Another thing you have to add as well is a north arrow to show the direction of where the site is or how it is placed. So I'll just show you how to make one. You can also import one from Google Images. So I usually just make it to keep it simple and use it as a vector, but you can essentially draw a circle using the circle option. Or if you right click it, there's also rectangles and then also different shapes that are already preset. Again, to make it, to make it a perfect circle, hold down Shift and then you can drag, and then that way it is equal. If not, it could be, I don't know if you can see that, but just doesn't keep its shape. And also right now it's showing up as a fill. If you go down to the side here where my cursor is, this box on the left is the fill, so essentially what's inside of the shape, whereas the other line is the stroke, kind of like the line drawings. So to change that, it'll give you a bunch of options, but since we're working in black and white, I usually just like to change the option to grayscale. Why is this not working? Okay, for now I'll just keep it as that. So that will give us a black outline, and then we want a transparent fill since we want to be able to see the circle. And then I'm just gonna change the line weight of this to make it thinner. So I'll do 0.25. So then that kind of shows the circle. And I'm just gonna line it up. So I'm just gonna essentially copy the existing north arrow so that it's the same as the site plan that we have. So I'm just gonna change the thickness of that to kind of show the difference of where north is in this sense. So then there we have a north arrow to our drawing. Okay, so now after you've created those, we can really get into drawing the or tracing the existing site plan. To start off, I like to put kind of a boundary box around the drawing, just so that keeps like a frame of where what I'm gonna be working on with. So to do so, I usually just go to rectangle tool and kind of make a base outline. So you right click, you can type in like the exact dimensions that you want of your rectangle. But for now, what I'll do is I'll just create a box. So then this way, you can see that everything in here is in the drawing. So after you make it, it's just kind of framed and it keeps it organized. Another option or another tool I use quite often, just to kind of when I'm moving around objects on the page, if you select whatever portions you want of the drawing, you can go to Object and group them. So then that way, when you move it, they're all together. Just kind of helps editing. Same with this, since we created our own north arrow, I just group that together so that I can move it around wherever I want on the page. Okay, I'm just gonna move everything up quickly. Also, let me know if I'm going too fast or if there's anything you want me to repeat. Okay, so for now, there's our scale, our north arrow, and then also our boundary box. Okay. So in drawings, I usually like to start with any kind of like structural form or roadways, just because they do kind of, it's like what contains the site. So to start off, I'll start with the roadway here that runs along the site. So to do so, I'll add another layer, and I'll just do roads. Another tip would be, since in the assignment brief there is like the complete list of the layers that you should have, I usually, like, before I start everything, just type everything out, all the layers that I need, so then that way I can start drawing and I don't have to think about it afterwards, and kind of work in that order. So I'll start with roads. Just make sure that layer is selected. And then also that the base map is on lock, so that anytime I draw over top, it won't move the image around, just so that it's precise. So to do so, the pen tool will sorry, I live by a train. I'm just gonna close my window. Sorry about that. Okay, so for the roadways, you can use the pen tool to draw any kind of straight lines. So I like to start from one end, and you create an anchor point, and then essentially you can draw it for as long as you need to, based on the dimensions of the drawing. To create a, I guess, a straight line, hold down Shift, and then that way it will just run along the axis of the, or the grid of the document. Whoop. So just for now, I'll show you. We'll do it to about this point. And that creates a line. Also with roads, since they are equal on both sides, you want to measure the distance between one end to the other. So when I measured it earlier, I believe it's 1.27 in terms of the width of the road. Where is it? No. Sorry, 1.277 centimeters. And then another option or tool you can use to kind of quickly offset that is the offset tool. So if you go to object and go down to pathways, or path, sorry, you can offset the path, which is the line that we created. And then you can type in the exact distance that you want. And then that way it'll show you. Here it's offsetting here. I don't know why it keeps going that way, but you can essentially use the direct selection tool to delete these lines. And then that way it's precisely at 1.27 centimeters. So there we have either side of the road. Another thing that's important when creating any kind of like your own shapes, for example, like the roadways, you want to make sure that you join the pathways. So for example, I'm just going to turn off this to show that. And this comes in handy when you go back and add any kind of hatching or any kind of apply any line weights, and it's all one shape instead of separate lines. It just saves you more time and it makes a cleaner drawing. So see how these are separate drawings or separate lines? To join them, you can also, where is it? You can essentially move the anchor point so that they join the path. Or what I like to do, yeah, so when you're drawing it, make sure that you click on the anchors, and then that way it's a closed vector versus if you don't. Oh, what's going on? So for example, if you draw the line and you don't hit the other anchor point, anytime you try and add a fill, it's going to miss a bit of the shape and you won't complete the, it won't be a complete shape essentially. So to do so, just anchor it down. And that way, when you click on it, it should. mean, green probably won't be a color you'll use for roads, but it shows the inside, how it fills it completely. So another tool that is important when creating shapes instead of the pen tool is the curvature tool. So I'm just going to delete this line. So if you go back to your icons, so this is the curvature tool. And essentially what it does is it creates little anchor points that connect the lines to create curves within your drawing. So for example, if I wanted to draw this kind of curve of the road, I would just start and click a point on the drawing and just kind of map out where, or trace essentially how I want that curve to appear in my drawing. You can also use the direct selection tool to connect the anchor points of each of the line and the path. So if you just hold it down, I mean, this isn't precisely accurate, but it'll just show you how now, if you select them and go to object and go path and then join, it'll join these two together so it creates one curve. Or when you start drawing it, you can start from the anchor point and can just continue the path. But the only thing with that is sometimes it will change the existing drawing, so it can be a little bit tricky. So pen tool and then also the curvature tool are probably going to be the ones that you're going to be using the most when you're tracing this image. As you can see, based on the Martha Schwartz site plan, there are a lot of like pre-existing like rectangular shapes that kind of divide the different gardens. So you can use also the different pre-made shapes to do so as well. Just make sure that they're to scale in the correct dimensions. So for example, if we start here, you can make for the flower bed to kind of outline those. And then as well, this will come in handy when you're adding hatches or dividing the space. So yeah, so the great thing about this site plan as well, like I said, it has a lot of kind of, it's, how do I describe this? Like the shapes of the site are quite divided equally and perfectly, so it's easier to trace, whereas if there's not as many like curves other than the roadways. So once you start doing after you do the roads, I would probably put in the context building. So for example, you can trace one of these. Exactly. This is just rough as well. And then here we have a building. So another option, if you find you're drawing something and it's not on the correct layer, you can add it. So you can change the layers as well. So I'm just going to do context. So let's say I drew this on roads, but I want to change it to context. You would just select the lines or whatever you want on the drawing. And then this little feature on the right here, the color, this, if you move it to the layer you want, that'll essentially change its layer. So layers, like Nadia was saying before, come in really handy when you're trying to like edit and add different line weights to your drawing. So just make sure you keep track of your layers and your organization, and you'll thank yourself later, essentially. So for example, another thing I wanted to let you guys know about layers is they do work how they are like in layers. So anything that is on the top of this list will show higher than anything on the bottom. So just keep that in mind when you're adding the different parts of the drawings. So for example, you would want to make sure roads and any kind of ground cover or pavement is below trees or anything that would sit higher. So just kind of visualize the space in real life and how it would, the different hierarchies of space, and then kind of coordinate that to your layers as well, if that makes sense. Another feature I want to show in terms of adding detail. So what you want to do is just first make outline all the shapes found on site. So for example, your roadways, your context buildings, the flower beds, any kind of built form, just make sure you have that first. And then you can go in after and add all the details such as the trees and then also the pavements and the different types of like foliage and leaves and plants. So for example, I'll show you how to add hatches, which will come in handy in terms of showing detail. So one here, see we have this kind of like stone pathway. So I'm just gonna add another layer, so ground cover. Just name it as ground cover. Okay, so here we have a stone pathway. And it would be very tedious to kind of draw all these little stones. So that's why there's the patterns or hatches in Illustrator that kind of make life easier for that. So let's just draw this outline of this pathway. And I'll just turn this off so you guys can see. So this is the pathway, and to add a hatch, it's kind of the same as fill. So for example, the fill is what fills the inside of the object. But to add a hatch, you go to the option over here named swatches. And then if you click this little 3-line, it'll show you, oh, sorry, actually you go down to libraries. And then if you go to patterns and then basic graphics. So these 3 options, the dots, lines, and textures, those are probably going to be the 3 different parts that you're going to use the most in your drawing, especially because this is a line drawing, so you won't be adding any color yet. So it'll just show you a variety of different options you can do to kind of add detail. So right now it's showing you, for example, dots, and to scale down this, to make it more accurate, if you right click the selected object, just go to transform and then scale. So when you're scaling hatches, make sure you click off the transform objects box so that it doesn't transform the shape and it only transforms the patterns inside of the shape. Typically, so I'll show you at 100%, that's what it looks like. If you go back to transform, typically I like to do for this kind of scale, so the 1 to 500, 20 to 30 sometimes. We'll make it just smaller, so then this way it looks more delicate and accurate. I'll just go back to this. So right now there's our base map, but then you can see, you can add, so this is also where you kind of get more creative. You can add your own hatches, which I like to do as well. And I'll show you how to do that as well. So I'm just gonna stop sharing for a second. Can everyone see my files?
Yeah, we could see it.
Okay, awesome.
Abby, there was actually a question like about layers be rearranged, like higher and lower. You could just show that maybe later, like just maybe like, you know, showing the ones that are at the top could be dragged lower and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I didn't see the. No,
yeah, don't worry about it. I'll just keep an eye out for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you. So if you go to your files, you'll find over time, the more drawings you make, the more hatches and trees that you add to your library. So it's great to kind of keep these all separate. But for now, I'll show you how to make your own hatch. So for example, that stone pebble pathway, I just brought an image from Google Images, and make sure you can find, it is a lot of playing around, but I just happen to find this one that works perfectly. So you can kind of search different options. So I just like to drag it directly into my image, and I'm just going to reshare this now. Okay. Can everyone see the pebble image in the Illustrator file?
Yeah, I could see it. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So once you bring that in, there's another option that I use a lot quite frequently, which is called image trace. So essentially what image trace does is it makes a JPEG image or a raster image into a vector, so then you can manipulate the line work of the drawing and just kind of turn it into essentially lines. And it does save a lot of time, especially if you're making like adding hatches, for example, or trees or any kind of detail. So I'll show you how to do that. So if you click on the image and go to object, you'll go down, scroll down, where is it? Image trace, which will be near the bottom. And you want to click the option make and expand. So essentially you'll see now it kind of takes the negatives and positive space and turns it into a vector with all the different pebbles. So when it does that, it'll be a grouped selection. So you want to ungroup it. So then that way you can play around with it. And then, let me see. I did this earlier. Then if you see, you can kind of select the different parts you want. Or if you reselect it and turn off the fill, you'll get rid of the, make sure that there's the stroke is still on, but you can see it makes it into the kind of pebble texture that you want. I did this earlier and it turned out a lot cleaner, so I'm just gonna drag it in. Whoa. All right, can everyone see the texture?
Yep, that looks great.
Awesome, okay. Yeah, so to turn this into a pattern or a hatch, like the other ones that are already on Illustrator, you just select the drawing that you want, and then you go to your swatches, and I like to just directly drag it in, and then it'll show up in a little box here. So new pattern swatch. You can also, if you double click it, you can edit it. So I'm just going to call this pebble pattern. And you can also do this for bricks or any kind of different ground cover that you want. But for now, we'll just do pebbles. And then it just kind of shows you the arrangement of how it's going to repeat in the space. So for now, we'll do grid just so, because it lines up perfectly. If you select this kind of pattern, you can also play around with the different line weights. So for example, if I make it 0.5, it'll show thicker. But for now, we'll do 0.1 just so that it's nice and delicate. You can also change the color of it, but we'll just do, you can do like a lighter gray, because sometimes this part, it is a lot of playing around with it, kind of based on your preference. Sometimes it shows up really heavy, so you want it lighter just so that it's not too, I guess, aggressively showing on the page. But we'll just keep it like that. So once you're done, click the done option. You can also save a copy if you want more than one of the same pattern. So once I hit done, it's going to be in this box, so in the pebble pattern. So if we go back and click on our pathway and now select the pebble pattern, make sure that the fill part is on. Where is it? It'll show up in our box. And then we want to scale this down so that it's more realistic. And then that kind of shows you the different kind of textures. And then if we look back to the Martha Schwartz, it's kind of similar. So yeah, like I said, this part is a lot of playing around to kind of testing it to see what works and what doesn't. And it's a lot of just eyeing it. But that's how you bring in your own patterns and make your own. And then we'll turn this off. And then another part of the drawing is you're going to add a lot of vegetation and trees. So here on the existing site plan, the trees are shown as circles. So what you can do is you can directly make your own circles that line up precisely. So I'm just going to turn this off again, because we don't want the pebble fill in our trees. So you can kind of trace the existing circles or trees that are on the existing site plan and lay those out. Another option, so if you make your own, I'm just going to add the center of it. So if you're going to be using the same, I guess, shape over and over and over again, what you can do is to create a symbol. So if you select your shape, I'm just going to group it so it stays together. Should be on the side. It should be a little club. Yeah. So symbols, this will just show you some of the pre-existing ones, but you can do the same, drag it in like we did with patterns, and then this creates a symbol. So we're just going to do tree. I don't think it'll be a static symbol. So then here it'll show up in your library. And as you create more, I guess, shapes in your drawing, they'll just kind of all be listed here. So then you can quickly add them in, and it's a really efficient way of adding in a bunch of different things. The only thing is, I think it's harder. You can't manipulate the symbol as much, like as easily as you can with the drawing shape. So for example, I think if you wanted to change the line weight, I'm just going to go back. Yeah, so make sure, I just like to make it how I would want it to show in the drawing. So for a tree, so yeah, so once we make the symbol, it'll be here, and you can essentially drag and drop this as many times as you want into the drawing. So we'll do that for others as well. So for example, if you made some of the pine trees on the left or on the right, sorry, you could have a pine tree symbol, and then you can also have just the regular tree symbol as well. Another thing you can do in your drawing is you can use image trace to kind of create this foliage, or I think these are perennials. So if I go to my drawing, I can show. Can everyone see the site plan I made?
Yes, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Why can't I zoom in? So if you zoom in, for example, it's very glitchy when I want to zoom in on this. So if you can see on this one, I made my own, I used image trace to make these perennials and brought them in to kind of add detail, as well as some of the different plants over on this side, as well as the more of the bushes as well. So like I said, yeah, it's a lot of like playing around with it, bringing in images from Google, try and stick to PNGs. I find tend to work better for image trace, but JPEGs do work as well. But those are the two file types that you can use to make the images. I'm just trying to think of what else. Oh, in terms of trees, I also make my own trees as well, instead of circles sometimes, if you want to show just a different style. So I'm just going to go back to.
Oh, there's just a quick question here. I'll respond to it. You don't have to create everything exactly the same. It's as long as you draw it like with your own ideas. So the pebbles don't exactly have to match.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the concept of the ground covers, and pine groves, maybe you can make them look like conifer trees, and deciduous trees, you can make them look different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and one other thing too, I just want to point out that there is a central walkway in the middle where those purple areas are.
Yeah.
There's a bend there, like there's kind of the page was scanned, so there's a little bit of a walkway.
Let me see if I can pull it up on. Yeah, so can you see it here?
Yes.
Yeah, so 13, that's where the walkway is. Another thing I was going to mention is you can always go into Google Earth as a great option to go and find detail, as well as images online to kind of see what it looks like in real life if you're not able to visit the site in person. So I did that a lot for, finding out this, since it was cut off in the site map or site plan provided. But it's really up to you in terms of like how much detail you want to put into your drawing or what you want to, I guess, show. Let me go back to the other one. And then I'll just show another example of how to use image trace for a tree. So I'm just going to bring in an image I found online as well. Can everyone see it? So if you find a tree image from plan view or from the top, you can go back to object, an image trace, and then make and expand. And this kind of essentially creates the outline of the tree. Sometimes I find though some of the images online are too, the resolution is really high, so it'll pick up every little detail of the tree, and sometimes it can be a little bit too busy on your drawing. So try and stick to ones that are just create the outline so that it's more delicate. But like I said, it's really up to you and how you want to represent that. So we just want to object and then ungroup it so that we can work with it. And then I just delete this white box around it and then take away this and then delete this other part. So now we have kind of an outline of a tree. I'm just going to get rid of the fill. And then also to scale the tree, if you click on, you can go to object and transform and scale it and then see how it makes it smaller, or if you want to make it bigger, you could use it like that, or type in higher. Since we can kind of use the existing site plan to scale the different trees, I just like to drag it and match it directly. So if you go to the top right arrow and hold down shift, that scales your shape perfectly, so it won't change. Like for example, if I didn't hold it down, it may manipulate it in not ways I want it to. So hold down shift, make it smaller, you can drag it, and then see how it shows up. So right now the tree outline is a little bit too thick. We don't want it that thick. So we're just going to change the line weight. We'll do 0.25 to make it nice and delicate. And then if you see there, that can be your tree outline. I'll also show another option. So if you're adding a bunch of trees and you find it's looking a little bit too busy, let me just copy and paste a bunch to show what I'm talking about. So if I just turn off my base map, see how they're overlapping and it's looking a little bit cluttered and busy and you can't really see the canopy cover the way you want it to. If you just select on the shapes that you want and go to, I think, window, scroll down to Pathfinder, this will show you the different shapes. So what it'll essentially do is it'll merge all these together. So if you go to Unite, for example, it'll just kind of merge them so that it cleans it up. The only problem with this is it does create one shape versus the individual trees. So I tend to do this at the very end. Or you can keep all the trees separate on your tree layer and work with it that way. So I'm just going to move these back to the different layer. Another option, so for example, if you wanted to keep changing them, I would do this at the very end because it'll merge them all together and then make it difficult to work with. But there a question in terms of layers previously, I think.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Can you just show that one more time? That was great. The kind of the deletion of the interior, because that's actually good. But as Abby said, do it at the end when you do the whole thing, and it basically creates like kind of the whole grouping of trees, like a forest.
Yeah. So the canopy cover, yeah. So it just cleans up the lines and only shows what you want. So for example, if you go here, I'm just going to delete this. go back. So select what you want to merge and window. If you scroll down, it'll be in Pathfinder. It'll also show you on some of them as well, the shortcuts. I haven't memorized all the different shortcuts, but there are a few that I use quite frequently that I know, but for some of them, you do have to kind of look and search through Illustrator, but this also comes with time. And then also, if you go online, there's a lot of tutorials and a lot of online sources that you can use that kind of have the base shortcuts that can help you navigate your drawings and create them. But it does come with time. So I don't think anyone expects you to know everything, but it does take time knowing all the different tools that Illustrator has to offer. So if you go to Pathfinder and then they'll show you the different shape modes. So the first one here on the left is what I use to kind of create this canopy. So if you click on Unite, it's just going to merge them all nicely. And then I'm just going to get rid of this one in the middle and show. So for example, if I merge them now, it'll show the kind of like empty space as well. So I'll show in my other drawing. So for example, I united these ones as well as, wait. These are also trees that I imported. I don't think I merged some of them, but some of them didn't merge precisely, but that kind of just creates a more cleaner and less busy canopy. So there's that option. And then we can also, like before, change the line weight of the trees. To kind of show the different, the 3 different required line weights, or you can use more as well. And then I'm just gonna look quickly in the chat to see.
Abby, the question was like moving layers up and down. Like you do that,
Right.
like it puts it on the top and the bottom. Like you
Okay.
could just show on the layers, like if you drag them up and down.
Yeah, so I'll show you, for example, so we'll put a fill on this tree kind of cluster. So right now we're showing, if, for example, you want trees always to be on the highest so that they show kind of canopy on over top of the pathway. So right now the tree layer is above the ground cover, but let's say we do our drawing and we made, for example, ground cover above, the trees will show underneath. So just make sure you keep track of these layers on the side. Sometimes when I'm doing my drawing, I get frustrated because I'm like, why isn't something showing above this? But if you go back to your layers, it'll show based on the order what the kind of hierarchy of the drawing. So these are great in terms of organizing both like your working method and also just the overall image as well. And then in terms of swapping layers, I'll just repeat that. So let's say I drew something on the wrong layer, or I wanted to try and move it to a different layer as well. You can just click on this side box or color box and then move that to the layer that we want. So as you can see, as I move down the layers, it moves down the hierarchy in the drawing as well. And then another great thing to do when you're working, so as you find over the time that you're working and you add more and more to the drawing, your computer can kind of get a little slow. So as you're working, you can turn off the layers and it kind of hides it. And then that way it frees up a little bit more space so that it's easier to work. And then also it makes it faster for the software to work as well. So that's another option that I find myself using a lot. And then also too, which we'll go over in more detail on Monday, but in terms of diagramming, you can turn off these layers to kind of only show what you want to show in certain diagrams. So for example, if we just wanted context or roads in one of, or pedestrian pathways in one diagram, for example, we would keep that layer on and then turn everything off, and then we can play around with that. So yeah, I'm just trying to go over, see what else I wrote down in terms of details. Another, I'll just show quickly if you wanted to add more context or details. So if you go, I'm just gonna reshare my screen. If you go to Google Earth, you can look up Yorkville and download. Google Earth is also free to download, or Google Earth Pro, sorry, is free to download. And you can save images based on the scale you want as well, of what you want to work with to add in, for example, like the context building, since they aren't on the Martha Schwartz site plan, you can add those in after. So I'll just show you quickly. So if you go into Google Earth Pro and go to save image, it'll create a map for you. And then at the bottom, it'll show the scale at which you want. So then when you bring in this image, you just want to make sure that it matches the scale to the drawing that you're working with, so that any kind of things that you add in after are represented accurately, if that makes sense. So you can save this. I tend to try and do a higher resolution. That way it's more detailed when you zoom in and out. But sometimes the more higher ones, they do take up a lot of space. So just keep that in mind. And then if you go to map options, you can also turn off some of these things. I always keep the scale and the compass, just kind of keep me oriented in the drawing, but you can make it black and white if that makes it easier for you as well. And then if you save it, you can save it to your computer in, I think you want to save it. Yeah, so click save image and then it'll be in a JPEG and then you can name it whatever you want and then you can add it to your file. And then bring it in like you bring in the sitemap for the beginning of the drawing. So I'm just going to go back to Illustrator. So once you've added all your detail, I believe you have to submit the assignment in both the AI format and then as well as PDF. So to do so, you go to File and then Save As or Export. So export, it'll just show you, you can change it into different formats, but for PDF and AI, it'll be under Save As. And then you can name it with the naming convention provided in the assignment brief, as well as you can save it as the PDF. And I believe you can save, when you save the PDF, there is an option to show the different layers as well, so that anyone who's viewing it in the PDF format, it'll keep all or maintain all your layers as well. So that's a great way to save it. And I'm just trying to see, is there anything else I have? Yeah, I think
Abby, that's pretty much everything. You covered
yeah.
it. I think maybe a couple of things before we go to questions is you showed that kind of central walkway where the scan bend is, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
maybe highlight where the shelter is. The bus shelter is different. The subway shelter. There's a couple of things that are not really accurate from the plan. So one is kind of where the scan bends, and then you know, that bus shelter that looks kind of like a nutshell.
So right now on the Martha Schwartz one, this is not what it looks like in real life. It's more rectangular. So I'll go to mine and I'll show you. So if everyone can see, yeah, this is more the shape it shows up as in real life. Also on Google Earth, it'll show something similar as well. And then in terms of the walkway, so if we go back to the base site plan, there's a, because it was in a book, there's a crease here. So this is where the walkway is going to go. So just maybe take note of that when you're doing your drawing, or take note of it now so that when you do your drawing, you remember to kind of go back and edit that. So if you look here, it should be represented similar to this. Another thing, you want to make sure you add labels as well to your drawing. So you can use the text option to add in, for example, different labels and then the numbering to kind of keep it a clean, kind of orderly labeling. So I would recommend probably putting the text, since it is 11 by 17, you have a lot of room at the bottom of your image to kind of keep the text off the site plan and let it just be the drawings. And then you can add in like faint or not faint, sorry, but labels, and then put the text at the bottom so that's not busy. Also, another thing to remember, make sure you add, for example, like your name and then the site of the project, just to kind of as basic requirements, and then all the different parts of the site plan. And then see each number kind of coordinates with the different categories of the different gardens and trees and areas of the site. Yeah, is there any more questions? I'm just gonna go back to the chat.
That's great. I think you covered everything. So Monday, maybe if we could, if you don't want to share the screen anymore, that's fine. Monday, and you can even probably stop the recording. Okay. Just save to cloud.
Stop recording.